Yo, so you just hit level 484 on the collection road, and you're about to open your first Pool 3 chest. But bam, you open it and it's boosters, the worst reward in the game. But that's okay. Just a few more games, and then you all of a sudden you're at your second chest and you're about to open this one. You have a 50% chance of getting a new card, so you're feeling pretty good. And then boom, you get this. Wait, no, not that. It looks more like this. And you're probably pretty disappointed. But believe it or not, this doesn't even make the cut in my bottom 5 worst cards to open early in Pool 3. This is Top 5 Fridays. Let's get into this Friday's Top 5. Number 5, Dr. Octopus. So in my last video, the top 5 best cards to pull early, so many people were commenting what they got first in their Pool 3 collector's reserves. And it was really, really cool to see all the variants and what people got, their experiences with it. So definitely comment below what the most disappointing pull for you has been so far. I'm curious to know that. But Dr. Octopus actually came up a lot in the comments. And some people were, well, majority were pretty disappointed. And I had a few that were pretty excited about it. So I had to put him at number 5 because he's definitely not the worst. Definitely not the worst. Wait till you see the worst. But he's a bit RNG heavy, and also in my experience of playing Marvel Snap, like the thousands of games that I have played so far since beta, I've seen Doc Ock come out like, I don't know, a handful of times, and I feel like maybe only once or twice it has benefited my opponent, and I've never really been successful with him myself. So maybe there's some experts out there that are going to tell me that this card is really good, wins them a lot of games, and fair play to you if it's working out for you. But from what I've seen, it usually fails and ends up in a retreat. So what does he do? He's a 5 cost 10 power. On reveal, pull 4 random cards from your opponent's hand to their side of this location. So you could just for free give them like Infinite or their late game curves. Because see, think about it this way. If they're playing a Swarm deck, let's say, with the Kazar, Blue Marvel combos to buff things up, they're probably playing all those 1-drops in turns 1 to 4. And in turn 5 and 6, they're probably holding on to Kazar, Blue Marvel, anything that's giving widespread buffs. You can't really counter that all that well. There's a few ways that I got here that maybe we can find a tricky counter. But ultimately, you're playing the card for free, and then you have to deal with it at the same location because they can just keep playing stuff at other locations. Mind you, you might have pulled quite a few of their cards, but it's just clunky. And more often than not, is going to give your opponent an advantage. The 10 power is nice, but that's kind of the only benefit here. Now, we do have counters, so we could play Cosmo sometime earlier before Doc, and then we play Doc at that location and you don't get his ability, right? He's just 10 power for 5, and that's pretty decent. You also have Shang-Chi and Enchantress. These are great counters to whatever comes out from the Doc Ock ability. So you play Doc Ock, let's say an Infinite drops and a Hulk or whatever else, and you're like, oh no, I'm going to lose. Your opponent snaps because they're like, haha, that was dumb. Well, guess what? On turn 6, you Shang-Chi all those cards and you win that location. The problem I have with that is you're committing your turn 5 and 6 to one location. So how do you win the other ones? You have to do that early enough. Maybe your opponent keeps playing cards elsewhere and wins them that way. So it just gets a bit awkward, and you might not have, despite that big swing, enough to pull out the win. And that's basically what Dr. Control aims to do. We got a lot of early stuff just to give us power and try to win out a location. And then we're going to Doc Ock on 5 and then counter with whatever comes out with our Killmonger, Shang-Chi, Enchantress, all that stuff. Basically react to the pull and their turn 6. Number 4, Adam Warlock. Oh, Adam Warlock. Oh, geez. He is a 2 cost 0 power card, but he has a very unique mechanic in Marvel Snap right now. He draws a card. At the end of each turn, if you are winning this location, draw a card. So it's a conditional draw. And it is hard to pull off. And your opponent, guess what? They can counter it. And also, there's only 6 turns in Marvel Snap, and you might spend an entire one of those, not even the first one, the second, playing this card. And if you play him any time after that, you're just diminishing value because he only draws at the end of the turn if you're winning the location. Oh, and by the way, he doesn't help you win the location because he's 0 power. So you have to have support. Guaranteed, you have to have support. And then the only thing you're really doing is thinning out your deck, which might help you out. But really, honestly, you only have 12 cards in your deck and you're already drawing enough throughout the game. Not that big of a deal. Now, I'm not saying draw is weak. I'm just saying when it's thrown together with all these crazy conditions, it becomes a weak card. And I have him here in the list because I actually got this in my first 5 pulls and I wanted to make it work. It has a a great animation. I thought draw would be really powerful from past card games. I always know that draw is a very powerful mechanic. And I wanted this to be great, but I just lost so many games trying to force this card. I just don't think it's worth it. It's not very exciting, I don't think. And sadly, this isn't the only draw card in this list. It's kind of weird their approach to draw, because I think because it's such small deck sizes, they have to be careful. But how do you make old Adam Warlock here work? Well, let's think about the Moon Dino deck, a pretty popular Pool 1 deck where you're focused on Devil Dinosaur buffs and playing Moon Girl to double your hand and have a lot of other things like Cable and Sentinel to make sure you always have a busy hand. And I guess Adam Warlock helps you out there too, because if you can draw some cards, then you're always going to have a full hand, if you can draw those cards. Another one I thought is America Chavez, because if we're really focusing on drawing our cards, we can thin our deck out even further, because America Chavez won't be drawn before turn 6. So you can really definitely guarantee that you're going to get Devil Dino at some point if you get a couple of draws off of Adam Warlock, which is the deck's win con. So it's really important to thin out the deck, get some draws, and make sure you get that big dino. Number 3, Black Bolt. All right, Black Bolt is notoriously bad. And believe it or not, he was actually worse than this. He used to be a 5'7" in beta, and he got slightly buffed to a 5'8", but unfortunately it wasn't enough. He's still terrible. He's an on reveal, your opponent must discard the lowest cost card in their hand. And sadly, that just doesn't do enough. You would think a decent body with a positive effect and disrupting your opponent would be a good card. But more often than not, your opponent doesn't really care about their lowest cost card on turn 5, and you're probably doing them a solid. And even if you get the dream discard, you discard the only card in their hand is their big turn 6 play, maybe you'll be okay. You just got 8 power, you disrupted them, things are looking good. But where Black Bolt really struggles is he doesn't gel with any decks. Like, there's no reason to put in Black Bolt over, say, Iron Man or another better 5-cost card like Magic or something like that. There's so many better options. My first thought when I saw this card is maybe he synergizes with discard decks, so maybe I can put him in. But really, one of the only beneficiaries from cards being discarded is Morbius, who gets +2 power for each card that you discard, not your opponent. So Black Bolt and Morbius, they're not buddies, unfortunately. The reason it's number 3 is not necessarily because it's the worst card. Yeah, it's down there. It's one of the bottom dwellers, but it's just disappointing. You want to get a cool Pool 3 card that you want to play with, and you get Black Bolt. It's just kind of like, it's kind of sad. But hey, if you guys got one of these cards in this list, don't get too down on yourselves. I'm sure there's a good card around the corner. It might feel slower than Pool 1 and 2, but you're going to collect these cards so quickly. Honestly, it flies by. And before you know it, you'll have those cards you really want. So I was trying to think of a deck for Black Bolt, and Synergy, it's like really stretching it thin. So I was thinking, okay, well, maybe he's trying to, get rid of cards in opponent's hand. So let's do that with other things like Mantis and Cable, taking cards from your opponent's deck, discarding cards from their hand, and now they don't have any cards to play with. That was the idea. And then Jubilee, because if we can play him for 4, now we might be talking. So I got the no cards for you deck. And this is wacky. I don't suggest trying this deck. Maybe if you have Black Bolt, maybe give it a shot. But otherwise, probably not good. It's an amalgamation of a bunch of different things that are going on here with Control and Iron Man and big power things. I even put in the Hulk because I thought, why not smash my opponent after I make them discard? Number 2, Crystal. Oh, Crystal. Oh boy, this is, according to Snap.fan, which records statistics. You guys should go check them out. It's an awesome resource. And this is a consistent bottom dweller. This card is always in the dumpster. And believe it or not, it used to be a very good card because it didn't have the condition of having to be played in the middle. So Crystal is a 4-cost, 4 power. On reveal, if this is at the middle location, shuffle your hand into your deck and draw 3 cards. Funny enough, this is a really powerful effect in a lot of other card games. And when she didn't have the constraint of being played at the middle location, it was pretty consistent. But you probably know by now, by playing in the first 2 pools up to this point in Marvel Snap, that location variance is a real thing. And you just don't know what's going to happen down the middle. Can you even play Crystal? If you can't, she's a 4-cost, 4 power, and that's trash. And maybe even if by the time you can, you don't really want to get rid of your hand because those important cards that you plan on playing, well, they're in there. So now what do? It's It's a bit awkward, especially early on, like in the first two pulls. Like there's some cards later on in pool 3 that you can get that are really going to help her out, maybe make her a little bit more viable. But in the first two pulls, like what are you doing with this card? Like there's really no point in running it when you can play anything else that gives you decent power and synergizes with your deck. For instance, the deck that I thought would work with Crystal early on is a flood deck, but she actually occupies the slot of Khazar. So it gets awkward already, but I thought I'd give it a shot anyway. So the idea is you play a lot of your 1-drops so that by the time you play Crystal, hopefully you don't really have any cards. You only have the one that you drew that turn in your hand, so that you're essentially drawing 2 cards. And like that description is a stretch, so there's not a lot of value here. Like you might have a leftover card, then you draw a card, and then you're going to play Crystal for only really drawing 1 because 2 are going to go back to the deck and you draw 3. And like what if they're not the ones that you wanted? So it just gets real awkward. And then if you have 3 or 4 more cards, then you're actually lowering your hand size, and you don't want to do that. So Crystal is number 2 for a reason. But number 1, Yellow Jacket. Oh, I apologize to the people that commented in the last video that Yellow Jacket was your first card. It's a rough pull, and you just got to get through it. Believe it or not, despite everything I'm about to say about Yellow Jacket, he actually is decent in a couple of other decks that require a lot of pool 3 support. But when you get him early on, oh my goodness, there's just not much going on for this card. There's just no reason to play this over something else. Any other 1-drop, it doesn't really matter. So he's a 0 cost 2 power. Sounds good on paper, right? Well, maybe. We'll get into that in a second. But his on reveal ability is afflict your other cards at this location with -1 power. Ouch. If you have 3 other cards there, that's like playing -1 power. Not good. If you have 2 other cards there, then it's like playing nothing at all. Except here's the kicker with Yellow Jacket. He might be free for 2 power, but he takes up a location spot. And really, like just playing something for 2 power just to take up a location spot, that's not enough in Marvel Snap. You got to have bigger impact plays. The worst parts too is he doesn't really synergize with like anything else. He has an on reveal tag, but you don't want to double that up with Odin, so you're not going to throw him in that kind of deck. And then also, if you were lucky enough to get Patriot early on, Patriot's going to help out those low cost, no ability cards like Wasp that I showed earlier. But not Yellow Jacket. He has an ability. His bad ability is not only bad, it's hindering his ability to get benefits from not having ability. It's just like, it's so bad. Like there's so much going wrong for this card. Even if he was 3 power, I don't think he'd make the cut. Like the dream is that you get him in your opening hand and you play him. But even then it's like, why did I take up that location spot? I don't know. And even further, if you're in pool 3 and you got destroy synergy cards like Death, you can't even Killmonger this card. You can't properly kill it. Unless you Carnage. That's like the best case scenario. And that's not even that great because Carnage gives +2 power for each card he destroys. And Yellow Jacket has 2 power. So it's like saving a spot that you already could have saved if you just didn't ran this dumb card. So, oh my gosh, it's just brutal. Like there's just, it doesn't really work out any which way. Like go ahead and tell me in the comments how you've been making Yellow Jacket work. The best way that I have personally been able to make him work is in a Lockjaw deck. So if you have Lockjaw and then you pull this, you can make things work because he's going to swap into something actually good from your deck. That's the idea, and he's free. So that has merit. But otherwise, you're in a tough spot if this is your first pull, and my condolences. But that's not the point here. We got to find some synergistic cards. So we have things like Hawkeye, because you play Hawkeye and then you play Yellow Jacket, and you're going to get basically +1 power. Maybe? I don't know. Not very good. Colossus. He's not going to get affected by this power, so that's kind of okay. You just hang out with Colossus, and that's 5 power, 2 cards at a location. Yeah, also not great. Okay, what about Cosmo? He can stop the on reveal ability, right? And then it's 2 locations and 5 power. That's kind of the same. Not very good. Cosmo costs more. Okay, tough to find synergy. What about the Bees deck? Not the Bees. No Nick Cage. The Bees, Bishop, hey, that could be something. You play a bunch of cards, you buff up your Bishop. That maybe we can make that work. Well, I don't know. Let's check out this clip. All right, check it out. I was just queuing into Marvel Snap like just normal, and then you won't believe what happened next. I was literally shook to my bones. I had Yellow Jacket in the opening hand, and I had 1 energy, so I was able to play Yellow Jacket and then Nova. Insane. And there we go. That is the bottom 5 cards to open early in your Marvel Snap Pool 3 journey. Now, don't get too discouraged. Like I was saying before, you get these cards fairly quickly, and it's a fun part of collecting the cards and experimenting with them. So don't sweat it too much. I do have some honorable mentions here that can be a bit rough as well. If you get one of these, it's not the greatest. Typhoid Mary, she has ongoing give all your cards -1 power. That can be tricky before you get cards like Zero, and just other ways of negating this ability, even Venom to gobble it up. So it's a bit tough. Quake is going to shake up the locations if played in the middle, which is a bit awkward. It's kind of got that crystal effect. Honestly, she almost made the cut, but she's just 2/3, and it's not really bad effect. If anything, you can throw your opponent off by playing this. So she kind of makes honorable mentions. And then you got Baron Mordo. He's a bit weird too. He's a 2/3. He's going to make your opponent draw a card, but it's going to cost 6. So that can actually really hinder your opponent's game plan. But the problem with him is you'll never actually know if that's what you did unless they play that card on turn 6, which is unlikely. So he'll always be a difficult card to evaluate. So that's why he makes it here. You got Wasp. Wasp is actually a fantastic card, okay? I had to put it here because if you get it early, it means you didn't get Patriot, and that's basically what Wasp needs to become a card. Or Lockjaw. Lockjaw is another good one too. One of those two, if you get those, Wasp becomes online, but until then, Wasp is basically a wisp. Black Cat gets discarded from your hand if she stays in your hand. So basically the only way to play her is if you have the available energy the turn that you draw her, which can be difficult sometimes. The only benefit here is that it does count for a discard for like Morbius or some other synergies there. So that's why she didn't make the bottom 5. Nick Fury is actually, he was a season pass in beta. So he's one of the newer cards to Marvel Snap, but he just hasn't seen a lot of play. In theory, it should work, right? You play him, and then he gives 3 random 6-drops to your hand, and then you get to play one of those on your following turn. But it's random, so it's not really consistent, and he's only 7 power. Maybe if he had a bit more power, it'd be worthwhile, but otherwise, it's not a great card to get early on. Agatha, that's a bit of a controversial one. Very fun, but all random, and it's just, I don't know if you want to do that and you're just playing Marvel Snap and you get this card, like you probably wanted to make a really fun deck, not let her play your deck. But hey, if you're having fun with it, don't let it get you down. She is 14 power, so it's not the worst. Falcon, Viper, and Hazmat, these can all do their respective things when they get a little bit more synergy with some other Pool 3 cards. Falcon, he's going to scoop up your 1-drop, so you can do it with like Angela and Bishop and replay those cards, but it might be a bit expensive and not enough power to steal games. Viper, you basically need the hood or anything that you can throw over to your opponents that's going to really hinder their play. Hazmat's going to give the -1 power to all cards. That can get crazy with Wong and some on-reveal synergies, but for the most part, early on, you don't want to see that card. Jane Foster Thor works great with Thor, but on her own, not so great. Until there's more support, more cards in the future that cost 0, then she might be really viable. And then the last one is I have Goose there, but Goose is actually a decent card, but I think in terms of fun, it's pretty underwhelming because it's just going to stop your opponent from being able to play 4, 5, or 6 cost cards at that location. You as well, but you probably built a deck around that constraint. So it's actually a decent card, but just not very exciting. Anyways, that is my bottom 5. Let me know what you've been getting that you haven't been too fired up with, and I'll let you know how I think about it. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. Every Friday, we're going to do a top 5. I got a lot planned. The next one is going to be my top 5 anticipated meta-defining leaks that have been released to the Marvel Snap community. So I will let you know about those, so stay tuned, and I will catch you guys next time.